As far as I can remember, I somehow knew, very, very deep inside of me, as early as at the wise age of 5, that I was going to pursue my studies in France when I would be a big girl. I dreamt of the scent of centuries-old books I could pick up from the shelves of an old and beautiful university library. I dreamt of a happening student life abroad and of long hours spent in amphitheaters. I dreamt of finally getting to touch snow and watching the colors of summer wear out from people's faces in autumn. But above all, I dreamt of Paris, the city of love, which I later found out was probably home to more kebab sellers and dal puri sellers than of French baguettes. But that is not why we are here today. When the time came for me to choose which university I wanted to go to, I barely even bothered looking at any outside of France, although I did apply to a few British universities, just so my mom would stop telling me, "You've got to keep your options open." Now, that is where the story gets interesting. At the very same moment, I got my letter of acceptance at La Sorbonne. My mother came across a notice in the newspapers that said there were scholarships available to India. I won't be mentioning how my spaghettis almost came out of my nose when she suggested that I should apply. India. What an outrageous thought. How could this even be an option after I had nurtured another dream for years? After I had finally gotten that one letter I had been waiting for all my life? That won't be a very hard guess. I eventually did apply, causing my well-planned out future life in Paris to go straight down the drain. But that is also the exact moment when my life changed 180 degrees around. So on the eve of my 19th birthday, I embarked on a life-changing adventure. But what if I had stuck with the initial plan? What if my mother had not suggested that I went to India? There's one thing that we can all agree about. It is that plans change all the time. But the one question I want to ask is, what are the reasons and the factors that shape our choices? What is the purpose, the drive, the why? Why is it that I, a young ambitious Mauritian girl from both African and Indian descent, who clearly had a knack for adventure, didn't feel like India was a place for me? Would I have reacted the same way had it been Germany, Australia, or the US? What was it about me that made me so reluctant at the thought of spending 3 years of my life in the Great Peninsula? What was it that stopped me from even considering African universities or Asian universities at all? I have had a lot of time to think it through, and I think it was my inability to see any sort of potential whatsoever in the Asian and the African continent. At no single moment did it cross my mind that these places could be worthy of consideration. You see, the core issue isn't that I had initially chosen France. The issue is that I had rejected Africa and Asia a long time back. Like me, many young people make choices based on the unjust rejection of something. In this case, the unjust rejection of themselves, of their own identities. Of course, our past history has been marked by colonization, uprooting, loss of culture, leading a lot of displaced population to have become utterly disconnected with their roots. But what is stopping us today from changing the way that we see Africa and Asia? What is stopping us from engaging in a process of intellectual decolonization, the decolonization of the mind? What is stopping us from choosing our own universities? What is stopping us from investing in ourselves? Don't get me wrong, I understand that in the choosing process, in the selection process of a university, a lot of factors come into play. The quality of education, the city, its facilities, its people, how much money the ferry tooth has put into your savings account for years. Another important factor would be prestige. We all somehow want it. We all somehow seek it. Do I believe that Africa and Asia are at par with American and European universities? No, I don't. But I think that Africa and Asia can provide a platform where you will witness innovative minds at work, technology being rethought in ways that you didn't even imagine. I also think that there is an unexploited potential in those places. You may not experience the highest kind of academic level in those places, but I am sure you will find things that are going to last for a lifetime. To tell you more about why I believe that Africa and Asia need to be your next destination, let me share my own experience with you. My journey in India lasted 3 years. Being in a country where billions lived, my perspective on things suddenly grew out of this very cozy little place I had created for myself. From my many encounters, I began to understand the wide spectrum of realities that could exist in people's life. Along my path, I met people that questioned and challenged my views, my ideas, who deconstructed my cultural biases. People who were a part of an environment where cultural, social, economic stimulation was central. I was also exposed to the beauty of Hindu mythology, to the wonderful tales of Lord Shiva. I made some of the most beautiful encounters, and from them, I learned how to gracefully move my shoulders to traditional Ethiopian music. I learned how to greet people when in an island in Polynesia named Tonga. I learned how to serve tea the Iraqi way, and of course, like all of us, I learned how to swear in way too many languages. So in only 3 years, I had lived 1,000 lives altogether. But most importantly, going to India enabled me to come to terms with my own roots and to better grasp the cogwheels of the Mauritian society. Had prestige and quality of education been my only standards, I would not be here sharing with you all of the things that shaped my perspective on things, all of the things that made me who I am today. The richness of the cultural dimension of Asia and Africa isn't the only reason why I think these should be our next destinations. I was recently introduced to the concept of indigenous knowledge systems. Indigenous knowledge basically refers to the sets of skills and philosophies that have been developed by indigenous populations over decades, centuries, millennia even, with regards to their environment. To give you solid examples of IK, indigenous knowledge, let's take a look at India's Ayurvedic medicine. Let's take a look at China's acupuncture techniques. Let's take a look at Tanzania's rotational farming methods, which are using methods that are being used all around the world to improve agriculture, for instance. These fields, these knowledge, these exceptional forms of knowledge are affecting in incredible ways the way that we go about economic markets, the way that we develop, the way that we innovate in fields like medicine, agriculture, construction, for instance. We may also now live in what a lot of people will call a global village. But it is true that all countries come with their own uniqueness. And like a dear friend of mine would say, homegrown problems call for homegrown solutions. What I mean to say is that being in a specific region will allow you to identify the issues and problems and to bring the right solutions to them, thanks to your cultural immersion in those specific places. Evolving in an African or an Asian setting, for instance, for a few years, may therefore help you widen your understanding of how these hold potential for innovation and how we could develop our own nations. It would be unfair to say that Africans are not choosing Africa and Asia. In fact, 1 million students enrolled in South African public universities in 2017. In Nigeria, this number goes up to 1.4 million. China is now home to more students than the US and the UK combined. This means that intra-regional student mobility and mobility across oceans has become an increasingly occurring phenomenon. So what I feel we should be doing now are two things. First, we need to make sure, and we need to start working towards making our universities in Africa and in Asia better ready to welcome young minds, better ready to provide a stimulating environment to young students. Secondly, I think that we should encourage African students to go to these places because the wide amount of knowledge that they can bring and learn from these places may change the face of the world. When you leave this place today, I want you to keep in mind that we need to give a chance to Africa and Asia. I believe that Africa and Asia can provide an incredible cultural immersion. They can cater for a unique student life experience. And yes, they can be a platform where opportunities can be given for innovators, creators, explorers, adventurers, knowledge seekers, for you. In the end, all of our life experiences may be very unique in their own way, regardless of where you go and regardless of where you study. But what if some of the most important years of our lives began in what I would love to call the places to be at? Thank you.